Hello. Transparency Tuesday, retrograde style. Here we are. Thank you for your understanding in the shift from Transparency Tuesday to Wacky Wednesday. Yesterday was a day. Yesterday was a day. And today is a better day for this conversation, for the conversation of why is it so important for female-bodied humans to experience their orgasm, like fully experience their orgasm. Why is that so important? We're going to get into it. We are going to get into it. And before we actually get into the conversation of why it's so important to allow yourself to fully experience your orgasm, I want to lay the foundation or the almost like invitation of, as we have this conversation, please wipe the slate clean. Like, please wipe the slate of how you have been taught, conditioned, how you've been taught to perceive orgasm, sexual energy, all of that. Wipe the slate clean, and just invitation to listen with an open mind, without attachment to what you already know, and with a willingness to hear some new information. Because when we're talking about orgasm, and specifically orgasms for people that live in female bodies, it's a really heated conversation. It's an intimate conversation. It's a vulnerable conversation, because orgasm for people who live in female bodies has a ton of cultural conditioning around it, right? It's like you want to experience your orgasm and learn how to experience orgasm and be sexually empowered. And at the same time, there's so much conditioning that says if you do that, your reputation's going to suffer. If you do that, you're a slut. If you do, and it's bad to be a slut. If you do that, then you're going to be picky. All these things. There's so many nuanced layers to the human experience when it comes to sex. And I'm sure the same goes for the human experience in a male body when it comes to sex. I'm sure that is the case. And today we're going to speak about the importance of experiencing your orgasm fully in a female body, because beyond just the layers of conditioning around empowered sexuality and what that actually means, there's also layers of conditioning around not every woman can orgasm. And some women orgasm like this, and fake orgasms. The amount of women who I have talked to who have been with lovers who say, oh, all my other partners orgasmed like this, right? Hey, that's actually not the male-bodied human's fault entirely. It takes two to tango. That's also the fault of whoever is faking the orgasm. So there's a ton of nuance in this conversation, and the reason I'm asking you to wipe the slate clean is because what I'm talking about today, yes, is orgasm in partnership, in partnered sex, lovemaking, sexual play, intimacy, but even more so and even more specifically is actually the orgasm of someone in their own experience during solo play, during self-pleasure practice, during self-cultivation. And the reason I'm going to focus on that is because that is actually the petri dish in which we can practice letting go. And letting go is actually what is so important here. And it is the letting go that will tie into the discipline, really, of letting go, that will tie into anal sex should we have the time. And I want to ground into one more concept. Every part of the conversation that I have about sex publicly is rooted in the assumption that you are your own advocate when you are in partner play or any kind of situation with other humans. You are your own advocate, that you're setting really good boundaries, that you're not dissociating from your body because you feel uncomfortable, and instead you're able to speak, that there is clear, explicit consent, consensual consent. And these things might be like, Alyssa, of course we know this, but I want to verbalize this because those are the things, and trust and respect between whoever you're playing with, including yourself, right? And so these are the things that you might say, Alyssa, yes, of course we know this, and yes, of course I know this, and When I'm having these conversations specifically about anal sex, I'm projecting my own experience, my own foundations. Hey, there's consent, there's respect, there's trust, there's communication. I am my own advocate. And if those foundations aren't there, I actually encourage you to ensure that they are there, especially when we, take the act of solo self-pleasure and then we open it into the broader spectrum of experience with another person. Because actually, especially for a female body, you are not going to be able to let go. You are not going to be able to fully surrender when you are in a sexual dance with another person if you don't trust them, if you don't respect them, if you don't feel respected by them, if you're not able to be your own advocate, you are actually not going to be able to let go. You're actually not going to be able to trust them. And that's not necessarily on a mental level, that's on a body, nervous system, I'm attuned to my environment all the time level. So the reason I say, hey, I want to start with those foundations, the trust, the respect, the communication, the being your own advocate, is because those things are actually essential for our nervous system. I feel so fucking safe in order to let go. And that's something that gets really brushed over oftentimes in the conversations of sex and sex positivity and, empowered sexuality and, this, that, and the other thing. Yeah, great. All these techniques, all of this is amazing. And as a female-bodied human, if I don't feel safe, I'm not going to be able to touch the orgasmic gold, the gold mine that is my connection to the erotic. So safety, true safety, true trust, true grounded into your experience-ness is of the utmost importance. And I know it's not the most fun part. Hi. Thank you. Nice to see you. I know it's not the most fun part, but it's super essential if you want to get to the places that I'm about to talk about. So you gotta feel safe. And it's your job to make sure that you feel safe by communicating, by setting the mood, by communicating to your nervous system, to your subtle energetic body. Yeah, it's actually okay to let go here. We don't have to hold on to ego attachment here. Okay? So let's just start with that. Second to that, why is it so transformative to experience orgasm? Why is it one of the most powerful things we can do to ground into our confidence as women, as female-bodied humans? Why is it so important? Why is it so transformative? Well, first of all, a state of high arousal, high enough arousal that you're orgasming. And not to discriminate, but also to discriminate. I'm not talking about just a clitoral sneeze, that quick, fast orgasm. That's not what I'm talking about. There's nothing wrong with that orgasm, but I'm talking about the kind of orgasm that, thank you. I love that. Actually, I love that affirmation in the following. Thank you for that. That feels super good, especially because I'm not in person with you. So thank you for that. The kind of orgasm that's deep, the kind of orgasm that you actually have to breathe into, the kind of orgasm where you're almost overstimulating yourself. Yes, clitoral sneeze. You're almost overstimulating yourself, but it's actually not overstimulation because you're breathing into it and you're focused on it, right? It's a demanding kind of stimulation. A kind that is encouraging you, is catalyzing you, is pushing you closer to, hey, your whole body is contracted right now, but can you breathe reverently enough into the sensation that you can genuinely open, that you can genuinely let go? Now, on a very tactile, skill-based, logistical view here for a second, in my experience, it's actually easier to get into this state when you are using a shower head or a vibrator. Because if you're using your own hand, you can get there, but not really, because you have feedback from your fingers to your brain that tells you what's happening. So actually for this kind of a practice, and I go into this in depth in the How to Build Your Self-Pleasure practice, it's up on my website. Also, obviously in Erotic Integration, we go into this deep, deep, deep. But when you're in that state of high arousal and you're actually able to go into the absorptive state, go into the trance state, when you're in that state, your brain chemistry is actually really conducive to learning. It's really conducive to creative thinking. Your literal biochemistry becomes a cocktail of, hey, we're open to learning. And your nervous system state is open to learning. And that's why when people have like incredible sexual experiences, they have these sexual awakenings that ripple into their entire life. And they start to be able to touch this level of creativity that we look at and go, what? How? What? How? Well, they learn through orgasm, through these altered states of consciousness that are accessible to every single human through modulation, through change of our biochemistry, through arousal, deliberate arousal, and then moving that aroused energy. We're able to hit these points where we're actually, okay, ego attachment starts to dissolve, right? And again, we don't want to demonize ego, but sometimes our ego is attached to things that in the past have protected us. Thank you, ego. And in those states of high arousal, in those states of the edge of orgasm, our receptivity to new ideas, to new perceptions of ourselves, to creativity, they're open, right? We're open, we're receptive to those things. Now also, in order to get to that state in the first place, that state not just of the clitoral sneeze orgasm, which is a great orgasm, but it's not going to, that's not fully experiencing your orgasm, right? So also to get to that place, you have to anchor into your body. You have to be willing to breathe into the intense sensation that you are experiencing, right? And life is a collection of intense experiences. And so this is where we get the parallel immediately. Oh yeah, you know what? Wow, it's getting really intense here. I'm going to breathe into it. To fully experience your orgasm, you have to be willing to breathe into sensation. And so the practice of fully experiencing your orgasm actually increases your capacity for sensation. AKA, I can now go into the world and have a hard day, have a shitty thing happen, have an amazing thing happen, and not get spun out. Because I know how to stay in my body and ground. I know how to breathe into the sensation. Okay, so that's a parallel. Now also, in order to get to that place, what do we have to do? We have to be disciplined enough to get out of our overthinking mind. And so all of those things beautifully relate. We haven't even started talking yet about why the actual orgasm is beneficial, but just the getting there, the cliche of the journey, not the destination, just getting to that point where you're in the full expanse of sensation, just getting there is a great practice, is a great parallel, opens so many doors into our actual experience. Now, in addition to that, you have to fucking know your value and know your worth. I'm sure in both a female and a male body, but you have to know your value and your worth in order to give yourself the time. One of them, the time to actually get to the state, the time to actually drop into a self-pleasure practice, the time space to actually set a container that tells your nervous system, as we talked about at the beginning, hey, I'm safe. Hey, I can actually get into my sensual body. Hey, I'm actually safe enough to let go. I'm actually safe enough to cease resistance, to surrender, right? So there is a practice and a reinforcement of I'm valuable. I'm worthy of this time space. And let me tell you, while that might seem easy and surface level, I would challenge you to go take the time space, give yourself 30 minutes to an hour, 2 to 4 times a week, and watch your conditioning come up, right? Watch your conditioning that goes, this isn't productive. Watch your conditioning that says, we could be doing something else. You should be checking emails. You should be answering this. You should be studying. You should be, it's going to happen. And in my opinion, that's actually part of the reason that female-bodied humans fake orgasm is because they feel like a nuance. They feel like a nuisance, wrong word. Good job, brain, but wrong word. They feel like a nuisance for taking up the space. And so when you actually make the space to drop into a self-pleasure practice that gets you to the point of obliteration, pleasure is my priority. Cheers to that. Cheers to that. Amen. when you actually are willing to set the space and take the time to get yourself into a depth that will obliterate you, a depth that will ask you, hey, if you want to topple over into bliss, you have to let go here. That requires you to value yourself, not just in your mental plane, but in the practice of being able to be in that energy, which requires time space, which requires you to hold it as a priority, which is why I love that you just said pleasure is my priority. Because if you don't make this, your self-pleasure practice, connecting with yourself, a priority, you're not going to have the experience that I'm talking about, and you're going to come back and be like, Alyssa, what the hell? That's not what... I did that thing, I popped porn on, and in 3 minutes I had my clitoral sneeze, and I came back, and I feel even worse than I did before. Yes, that is not what I'm talking about. And that's fine. If that's your experience, and that's how you want to have your experience, and that's a deliberate choice, that's great. But what I'm actually referring to is you having the audacity to take up time space in order to connect with the portal that lives between your thighs, aka the portal. Why am I calling it a portal? Not to be cute, not to be hip. I'm calling it a portal because the stimulation of the clitoris reverberates through your entire body. The stimulation of your vagina, of your pussy, of your cunt, of your quim, however we want to refer to the portal, it is actually a portal because it modulates biochemistry. It changes the chemicals that are flooding your bloodstream. It requires a certain nervous system state. And it's a portal because it allows us to access a consciousness that is different than the one we access all the time, the one that we live in. And as you know, when you have vivid or intense experiences, they imprint on you. They hint at possibility. They hint at alternative realities. They hint at a different way of being, a way of being that disrupts the normal. And disruption of normalcy is one of the most potent, creative fires, fuels, building blocks that we can give ourselves. So having the audacity to actually take up the time space to get into the state that I'm referring to, the state that you have to be in order for this to work, right? And that's the nuance behind the sentence. The most powerful thing a woman can do is fully experience her orgasm. That's the nuance between an orgasm and full experience of orgasm, which essentially is a dance in surrender. And surrender doesn't just happen. It requires presence. It requires a feeling of safety. It requires a letting go, a willingness to say, fuck it. I have no idea what's going to happen. And that's what I'm here for. And you know what? At least through the lens I'm looking at, that's life. We don't know what's going to happen. And that's scary, but it's also enlivening. So let's go back here. When you make that time space to drop into self-pleasure practice, it speaks to your willingness to invest in yourself, to care for yourself, to meet yourself deeper, to actually say, you know what, I'm curious about what lives inside of me. I'm curious, and I'm willing to take the time space. I have the audacity to actually explore what it means for me to open to more sensation, to open to my experience. Not to mention the willingness to actually work for the orgasm, work for the altered consciousness. And that's something that, hold on, I need to push this log into my fireplace a little bit better. One sec. Pun intended, but also not really, but hold on. Okay, back. I love contrasting sensations, and up here in the Colorado mountains, it's getting warmer, but it's still cool. And so to have the fire going is lovely because I can feel it on my face and on my body, but the cool air is also sensational. Okay, where was I? Oh, the willingness to work for it. I've heard a lot of stories of lovers giving each other orgasm. And there's a difference. This is a projection of my experience and my values. So it's not the truth, it's my truth. There's a difference between, oh, I take pride in just like getting someone off, giving them an orgasm. Cool, you got your orgasm. Great, moving on. And actually getting into the granular depth of an experience that may or may not end in an orgasm, but that requires us to open, requires us to really drop in. And the latter one that I just spoke to, that, hey, let's actually just be in the experience. Let's be in the sensation of connection, of aliveness. That requires a willingness to work. And it's super healthy for humans and female bodies to have a willingness without anyone else, just with themselves, with ourselves, to work for orgasm, for our own. Because if I'm willing to work for my own orgasm, if I'm willing to work for that moment of obliteration, that moment of sweat dripping down my face and breathing heavy to work for that moment where I get to go, oh yeah, cool, right in front of me I see I can hold on tight and not let go, or I can actually let myself crumble for a moment here, and I can let my ego attachments dissolve for a moment here, and I can just be one with the rising sun and the ever-changing moon and the tides and the cycles, and for a moment I can completely abandon myself, my ego. If I personally am willing to work for that, then I'm going to have a certain standard when I get into the dance with another that says, hey, I'm willing to work for it. And I'm also valuing and communicating and advocating that you are also willing to work for that with me. And that's super fucking important. If you're not willing to work for it, if you're not willing to take the time, space for it, you're probably not going to have the confidence when you're in a dance with another person to say, hey, actually, like, yeah, that clitoral sneeze was great, but what I'm after is something that we have to work for. We get to work for. And in working for it, you're going to get to see me, witness me in a totally transformed version of my being, of myself, for a moment. You know, I was listening to my really great friend and colleague, Kimberly. She's the owner of Well Bar in Santa Fe, which if you're ever there, stop in. It's beautiful. Her services are amazing. It's easy. I got some injections of glutathione and NAD and all the good stuff. But anyways, she was talking to me about witnessing a woman birthing, right? And she's caught over 400 babies. And she was talking about how sometimes she gets to see these moments where the woman is completely transformed into this like goddess, into this like fierce, like gone from her ego attachment. And I've never birthed. If you have and you're listening, please speak to your experience. Gone from her ego attachment to neat, to pretty, to well-kept, to what she should be, and just totally taken over by sensation, by life force, by this intensity. And as she described it to me, all I could relate it to in my own experience, or I shouldn't say all I can relate it to because it felt quite similar, but of course very different because birthing probably can't be compared to. But all I could compare it to is orgasm. And that willingness to be in the depth of orgasm where I am gone and I am completely transformed. And if you took a snap photo of me in that moment, it probably wouldn't look like some perfect, elegant surfaces of orgasm. It would look like Alyssa was gone My mouth was open, there's sweat pouring down my face, and maybe my face is actually contorted. There's something bigger than me possessing me. And the way to that is through sensation. And that's why it's actually so important for female-bodied humans to experience orgasm, because the archetype of feminine is receptivity to something bigger, something more terrifying, something intangible. It's not about being feminine in the ways that we've been conditioned to be feminine. It's about being willing to be a vessel, a receptive conduit. And that's what true orgasm is. That's what true obliteration is. It's I'm going to stop attaching to Alyssa, to the identity of Alyssa. I'm going to stop attaching to that. Why? Because I know that while Alyssa and her identity is beautiful and here and growing and here to grow, there's actually something bigger that wants to possess me. There's something that wants to imprint on me that I could call God, that I could call Eros, that I could call the erotic, that I could call sensation, that I could call spirit, that I could call soul, that I could call universal oneness, that I could call the goddess. I could call it lots of things, and it doesn't matter what I name it because I'm going to feel it different than you. But it's something that allows me to, for a moment, transcend myself. And that transcendence happens through letting go. It happens through the ceasing of resistance. It happens through abandoning oneself. But when I say oneself, I mean one's ego, one's attachment to what makes one feel safe. And all of this is words. You have to experience this to go, oh yeah, I fucking know what you're talking about. You have to experience it. And that's why in that moment in the hot springs with my good friend Kimberly, when I said, what is the most powerful thing a woman can do to anchor into herself, into her confidence, so that we stop believing these myths that say that we have to have perfectly straight skin that's smooth and perfect and tight and what is it that we can do? And she said, well, fully experience your orgasm. Cheers to that moment. Because I was like, yes, that's fucking right. Because in that moment, you realize, I realize, we get to access the knowing that there is something that we can always access that far transcends those hollow symptoms of sexy. There is something that we can access that is far more grounding to us than just looking a certain way that we've been taught is feminine or beautiful. And again, this is not the truth. This is my truth based on my experience. Also, when you engage in this with a partner, right, when it's not self-pleasure, and by the way, self-pleasure is really important for what I'm about to say. When you engage in this with a partner, you will get to practice using your voice. You get to practice using your voice because you'll get to practice saying, hey, what you're doing is great, and can you shift a little bit here? Can we do more of this? Can I do some of this? And that's vulnerable to share your experience, to disclose your needs. That's vulnerable. And vulnerability is gorgeous. And it requires a level of safety, which is why I started where I did in this conversation. And it requires a level of safety and trust with yourself, because if you are rejected, you need to know what it feels like to go, hey, that's not about me. Let me pull it back into my own values and ground back into my own self. Rejection's never about you. Rejection's always about the other person. And that's why, like, if we can be compassionate when we are rejected, or someone rejects us, or we're rejecting someone else, it's not about you, right? So the practice of getting to actually use our voice and ask for what we need requires a level of audacity with our conditioning. And we want to do this in a way that exalts the other person, of course. But that's why self-pleasure practice is super important. It's not, I had this conversation yesterday with a client. Self-pleasure practice isn't fake it till you make it. Self-pleasure practice is, hey, I'm going to meet my own internal being. I'm going to meet what lives inside of me, and I'm going to learn to accept it, to love it, to work with it, to alchemize it, so that when I meet another being and we are in this dance, I'm oriented to myself. Okay. So, why is it so important? Why is it so transformative? Why is it so powerful to experience your orgasm as a woman? Because when you really, truly experience your orgasm, that means you have let go. That means you have let go. That means that you have chosen surrender. And this is where we come to the bridge of the conversation about anal sex. There's a lot of stigma around anal sex. It's not always the most comfortable conversation. And as I have jokingly, but also not jokingly said many times, in my opinion, it's the fastest path to enlightenment. Not claiming to be enlightened at all, but the process of actually allowing anal sex to be a pleasurable experience requires some foundational understanding. That is a beautiful metaphor for life. So we're going to get there in just a moment. But I want to first talk about letting go, because yes, that's the bridge into the next part of the conversation. But there's always nuance to all of these flash phrases. Oh, surrender. Oh, let go, right? And this is why it's hard to make definitive statements from my perception of things, because there's nuance. But for a moment here, let's just say that you're safe, okay? So who's been cliff jumping? Probably most people have jumped off of a high object, whether it's a diving board or a cliff, into water, into safe water. Water, when you hit the water, because you've seen other people do it, you're going to be okay. So that's our metaphor here. You're cliff jumping. Let's actually say that you're hanging from a cliff. And you know that when you fall into that water, it's going to be safe. But there's something in you, your survival instinct, that's like, you better hold on. You better not let go. You better hold on to the side of that cliff. Because we don't actually know what's going to happen if we free fall. And we don't actually know for sure that we are going to be safe, even though we've seen other people do it and they're safe. So allowing ourselves to build up and breathe into the sensation that would get us to an orgasm that would obliterate us requires us to stick with the sensation. It requires us to breathe into the experience. And then, not just that, but when we are at the edge, when we are hanging off the cliff, it requires trust, a trust fall. It requires a ceasing of resistance, a dissolving of the white knuckling. And I think all humans white knuckle. I think we feel like we have to white knuckle in order to keep things in control, in order to be able to know what's going to happen next. And I think that oftentimes that keeps us from our aliveness, like genuinely keeps us from experiencing sensation. And when we're talking about the specific experience of a woman, a female-bodied human, there's a fucking lot of pressure points that we're asked to white knuckle. The size of our bodies, how our faces look, how we dress, how we be feminine, how we show up in sex. And there's really no one right way, but there's an immense amount of pressure on us that says, yeah, there is a right way, actually. And so we white knuckle to the ways that we think, because we've been conditioned to think. We white knuckle to the ways we think are right, are sexy, are beautiful, are feminine. And actually doing so cuts us off immediately cuts us off from our experience, from the erotic, from connection with that bigger thing. It immediately cuts us off from our capacity to be in continual transformation, continual evolution, continual opening into what we are here to open into. And we trade that for the cultural constructs of, I'm pretty, I'm neat, I'm beautiful. And look, as I say all of this, I am not pointing the finger out. Where do you think that I am speaking from? My own experience. Just like yesterday on the phone with a different client. She's like, I just can't get into the mirror thing. I can't get into mirror gazing. What's the point? And a sentence before, she had proceeded to say, and this is really common. This is not uncommon at all. She's like, well, okay, I'm not at all in my body. I'm not at all. I'm here. I'm up here. I'm here. And my body's here. But they're not, my awareness, my consciousness, it's not in my body. It's not connected. And I was like, that is why you start with the mirror. That's why you do the mirror gazing. Because when you can see yourself back, when you can see your consciousness, when you are conscious of yourself in a body here, it's super fucking grounding. It's super grounding. Immediately you are confronted with, I exist as a physical being. And if there's something to get you out of your head real fast, it's that. And it's the reason it's important that we get out of our heads and into our bodies when it comes to the idea of fully experiencing your orgasm is because you cannot fully experience your orgasm in your head. You can't. You actually can't experience anything fully just in your mind. You can prepare yourself, you can think about it, you can analyze it, and you can never have the actual experience you would have if you experienced something in your body. Because the body collects so much information. It's so many separate components working together. The sum of the parts is greater than the whole. That's why we get into our body. And so it is that choice to say, hey, I'm going to let go here. I'm going to let go of the edge of the cliff and I'm going to free fall. Because I know the experience of free fall is actually what I need. It's what brought me to the cliff's edge in the first place. I can't tell you why, but I know I need it. I know that I need to trade the should-bes for, there's a crazy candle happening back there. The should-bes for the unhinged expression. I know it's time to trade the neatness, the prettiness for the expanse of capacity and sensation. I know it's time to trade the keeping up with the Joneses and the homogenized way of being for my own genius. You can't feel your own genius if you're not willing to let go. And look, it's okay if you are like, yo, it feels scary to let go. Of course it does. We live in a culture that layer upon 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 layer reinforces, don't let go. And it's not because the culture is inherently evil or bad. It's because we have worked really hard as humans to get to a point where we actually feel safe. And not all of us do yet. So collectively, when we aren't necessarily fully safe yet. And at the beginning of this conversation, that's what I started with, the importance of feeling safe in order to be able to surrender. Yeah, you usually get a message post-orgasm. Totally. The obliteration ones, they're coming in the whole time because whether it's post-orgasm or during, you're connected to something bigger, right? You're not in your own head about stuff. And the thing that we've been duped into thinking is that we get answers by thinking. We don't get answers by thinking. We get answers by letting go. We get answers by letting go of what we think we should be thinking about and just being present and all of a sudden, bloop, into our awareness. That's individual circuitry through the lens of human design. Spontaneous, knowing, spontaneous downloads, spontaneous resolution of a concept. And logical circuitry, you're watching patterns. That's it. And experiential circuitry, you're having experiences and then allowing your brain to sort through the kaleidoscope of experiences. So all of those states require, in my opinion, a somewhat meditative, unattached state of being. Guess what happens when you let go of the side of the cliff? You naturally open into a meditative, unattached state of being. You are in free fall. Or as my brother said one time, not at all related to sex, but just in general, he said, it's the trust thrust. That's what you're doing. You are letting yourself go. And you're doing so deliberately. That doesn't mean you're not caring for yourself. That means you're surrendering to what is. You're surrendering to what is up. Yeah, we get answers when we have... Yeah, so I would actually say we get answers when we have no questions. I would actually say we get answers when we hold questions in our awareness without attachment to an answer to that question. That's my experience. When we can hold questions in our awareness, and this is why you can use self-pleasure practice to resolve things. You can use self-pleasure practice to connect to whether it's the collective unconscious, to God, to spirit, to whatever you're connecting to just your own spaciousness in your mind. You can use it for that. And when you let go, you trade what's acceptable, what's been taught to you as, hey, this is the lens of acceptable. You trade that for your actual experience. You trade what you're taught to perceive as acceptable for the truth of your own experience. And that trade, hey, you know what? I'm going to let go of what I've been taught is acceptable in exchange for the truth of my very own experience. That is one of the most empowering things that I've ever experienced. And that comes with the practice of surrender, the letting go. And this is where where is it? I want to make sure I get it right. The definition of surrender is to cease resistance, and it's also to abandon oneself entirely. Now, if you even pay the slightest bit of attention to what I share, which no pressure to do so, but I imagine if you're here, you do. You know I'm not for self-abandoning, right? Like if you have a boundary, you set the boundary, you hold the boundary until it needs to change. If you need to do something for yourself, you do that thing for yourself. If you have a truth that goes against what is being experienced, you follow the thread of your own truth. Self-abandoning is not healthy, but, and to quote Richard Rudd, it's a big but. Abandoning our ego attachments, if we could put abandoning oneself and we could substitute the word oneself for ego attachments, I would say it's really healthy to abandon ego attachments, even if you go back to them. But for just a moment, how does it feel to not be attached? At least for myself, it feels like possibility. It feels like potential. It feels like relief. It feels like, oh yeah, cool. That ego attachment I have, that's one option. It's just one option. There's lots of other possibilities. And when I can open to those possibilities, I feel liberated. So, yes, it's like unspoken guidance allowing the answers. Yeah, totally. And that's where, you know, again, like I'm putting this through the lens of I actually think that the surrender is functional. Whether you're with a partner or you're by yourself, whether I'm with a partner or I'm by myself, the choice to let go and the actual free fall that happens, it's functional. It says to you, yeah, this is going to be uncomfortable. And can you breathe into it? Because just like I actually wrote a post about this in 2019, the come up to anything spectacular is uncomfortable. Right? Like that's something that I have seen as a very consistent pattern in my own life, whether it's dropping into a psychedelic journey. The come up into the actual shift in perception is super uncomfortable. This is where the anal sex comes in. This is one of the first places I actually noticed this metaphor. oh my God, I love anal sex. This is years ago when I started having it with my now husband. And I was like, yo, there's like a legitimate discomfort here. And what I realized through the practice of it is every time we started to engage in anal sex, there was a fork, there was a nexus point, and then two choices that I had. Which again, like I said, there was consent, there was safety, there was communication. I'm my own advocate. There was lots of lube. You gotta have lube for this shit. None of the bullshit of whatever the fuck happens that is actually not okay at all, where there's no lube, there's no consent, there's no respect, and people are fucked up. That is not what I'm talking about. You can see it in my face. Not what I'm talking about. I know, I just got serious for a second here. But unfortunately, a lot of people have that experience with anal sex. Anyways, what I'm talking about is the nexus point of the two choices. The moment where in my consciousness, I become aware that there is a discomfort here and I can either choose to contract, oh, it's so uncomfortable, and tighten around the discomfort, or, which again, legitimate option, right? That's a legit, hey, this is actually uncomfortable, I'm getting a body no. Okay, if that's your choice, that's legit. So there's actually three choices. There's a body no, I'm gonna respect the body no, it's a full no, please stop, we're gonna stop. The middle choice is, I want this, and I'm still gonna contract around the discomfort. I'm still gonna hold my body really tight, and I'm not gonna open into the sensation. I'm going to actually resist the sensation. And then there is a third choice. And the third choice is, I'm going to open to the sensation. I'm going to breathe myself open to the sensation that is happening right now. Hold on. I have a rogue candle here. And in breathing myself open to the sensation, I actually begin to relax. I actually begin to relax. And as I relax, as I feel safe, as I feel grounded into my own body, I also can now enjoy it. I also all of a sudden just got the body permission to actually enjoy the sensation because I'm breathing myself open to it. And to me, this anal sex metaphor is the metaphor for life. At almost every point, at every nexus point, right before we are about to transform, right before we are about to break through, right before the shift, comes a point of immense discomfort. Immense discomfort. And we have three options in that moment. No, it's a body no, it's a no, and you step away. 2, it's a body yes, I feel the discomfort, and I resist my experience. I resist the sensation of my experience, even though I want it. And therefore, I don't necessarily enjoy my experience, but I'm having one. And third, the lucidity and conviction to say, I chose this. I chose to be penetrated by life. And so, in knowing I chose that, I'm going to breathe myself into it. I'm going to breathe myself open. I'm going to allow myself to experience the sensation of the experience that I have chosen. Even though the beginning of it's uncomfortable. Even though the come up is uncomfortable. And in that moment, when we choose, whether it's to let go of the side of the cliff and fall into the beautiful blue swimming hole, whether it is the moment that we choose to say, hey, I'm actually going to continue to breathe into this intense sensation of my self-pleasure practice, and I'm going to let go, and I'm going to let myself topple over the edge, and for a minute, yeah, I'm going to be gone. Or it's anal sex, and we say, you know what? I chose this. I want this, and it's uncomfortable. And because I know I made the choice to experience it, I'm going to breathe myself into the moment, breathe myself open. And it's in that moment when anal sex becomes, oh my goddess, and her wild fucking lover, it becomes incredible. because of the epiphany that it was my choice to either contract around the uncomfortable sensation and resist the experience, or to cease my resistance, to surrender, and allow the waves of the experience to be what I experience. And it's that simple. It's that simple. As long as you have the foundation of safety, respect, trust, safety, respect, trust, communication, advocacy, as long as that's there, it's actually that simple. The choice between, do I breathe myself open into this experience that I want to be having, that I've asked to have, that I've seduced to have, or do I resist it? And that's where there's never been a more true saying than it is what you make it. It is what you make it. And there's no wrong way to make it. It's your choice. You get to choose. And that's where the intersection between the surrender needed, the letting go needed to actually have those ego obliterating orgasms. And look, the ego is immortal. It's going to resurrect itself. This isn't about having no ego. We all need an ego. But it's good to let it die so that it can be resurrected in a way that's more aligned with where you're heading and your desires and your soul's evolution. The ego is not bad. It's an important component. When we don't have enough ego, we put ourselves in danger. When we have too much, we put ourselves in danger. That's why it's great to kill it off, let it grow back. Think about what you do to a rose bush. You prune it. You prune your ego, right? And you prune your ego by allowing yourself to have these obliterating orgasms. And when I say allowing yourself, that's exactly what I mean, because it's a conscious choice to allow Mr. Fluff, come here. To allow these experiences, to allow sensation. Come here. My cat. So that's that. Does anybody have questions? Does anybody have reflections? Does anybody have disagreements? Where are you at? Is this landing? Is this a familiar experience that you also have had? And, you know, while I could talk about the actual metaphor of orgasm, of allowing sensation, if we're getting super tactile and like where the rubber meets the road, the choice to let go, the choice to surrender to the process and to the sensation of the process is really important, because we're all in bodies that are always decaying. We have souls that want to transform. Yesterday is not today, and today is not tomorrow. And that's the truth. And in my experience, when we can open to that truth and allow that truth, life is a lot more enjoyable. There's a lot more sensation in every moment. And this is a process. Like, this isn't an overnight thing. It's a practice. It's a practice. That's why when I made Erotic Integration, it's a timeline. It's a spiral. It's a experience. Because you've spent X amount of years in the body that you're in, conditioned, imprinted. And these realizations, these experiences for me have happened over time, really the last 10 years. It's why sex is such a poignant, relentless, accurate metaphor for life, because there's so many ways to experience it. And there's such a narrow framework that most of us perceive sex through. And it's so broad. The possibility there is endless, just like with life. It is what you make it. And so, once again, to kind of close out, if no one has questions here, and thank you for those of you who have contributed to this conversation, when we can let go, when we can allow ourselves to experience ourselves unhinged, overwhelmed by sensation, entirely present in our experience, not worrying about what it should be or what it needs to look like or how it should go or, what we saw in the magazine or whatever the fuck, then we can actually have our own experience. And we can actually have our own experience. We feel way more confident, way more alive, and a lot less like we need to make body modifications, inject ourselves, starve ourselves, show up in some kind of predetermined way that is sexy. Copying the symptoms of sexy is not sexy, in my opinion. Feeling yourself, witnessing yourself gone, witnessing yourself in those like really intimate, vulnerable moments when your armor is down and you get to fucking feel yourself, the essence of yourself, the uniqueness that is you, the true beauty of who you are. When you get to feel that, you will stop copying symptoms of sexy, because you'll go, oh fuck, that's actually not sexy at all. What's sexy is the emergence of your uniqueness. Burn the scripts of sex. Burn them. Burn the scripts of eating. Burn the scripts of sensuality. Burn the scripts of marriage. Burn the scripts of daughter. Burn all the scripts. And allow yourself to fucking trust your own experience. It's a practice. I'm not a master at it. It's a practice. It's a sensational practice of letting go of all that we think it should be in order to say, hey, what is it? I'm going to breathe into it. I'm going to open to it. I'm going to stop resisting it because I've chosen it. And I will continue to choose it. And as I continue to choose it, as I continue to let go of my conditioning, as I continue to cease to white knuckle to what I think it should be like because that's what I've been taught, that's when we experience bliss. That's when we experience ourselves as conduits for the erotic. And if you've never experienced what I'm talking about, or you don't feel like you have a super close connection to sexuality, think about the moments where, you are doing the hobby that you love doing and you just hit flow state. And it's like for a second, you're gone. This does not have to be experienced through sex only. However, sex and self-pleasure is a really potent, reliable way to access these experiences. And yeah, just like if you're trying to become a master guitarist, you're going to have to practice. If you want to become a conduit for the erotic, you got to practice. And sometimes I meet a lot of resistance with this, and it's okay, because we've been conditioned to think that sex is spontaneous and it always should be. That's fucked up. That's another script. That, I will say, caters to the male-bodied form of arousal. And that's okay. Great. It can be spontaneous. If you're in a woman's body, if you're in a female body, or you are in a body that is estrogen, progesterone dominant, you gotta give yourself some time and structure, safety, container, because your nervous system has to feel primed, juicy, salivating, safe, open, in order for your pussy to salivate, feel safe, feel juicy, feel open. Yes? Okay. Thank you to everyone who joined. If you are like, Alyssa, I am really curious about this topic, about sex, about orgasm, about the metaphor of sex and the importance of letting go of those scripts, the importance of choosing to not white knuckle to what we think it should be in order to actually have our own experiences, come join me in Erotic Integration. This course, when I launched it into the universe, I had a lot of doubt about it because it's genuinely made from my own personal experience. And so my population was N = 1. It was me. And now I have 14 women in it. And it's having the kind of impact I want. And so that doubt that I have as part of my process, as part of my trial and error kind of experiential scientific method, my hypothesis is being proven correct. I'm getting the conclusion I want, which is that, yes, erotic integration, integrating our connection to Eros, does ripple into every part of our life. And it is a catalyst for deconditioning. It's a beautiful dance with human design. And if you want to go deeper than just integrating the erotic, which I shouldn't even say just, because it's going to be deep by design. It has to be. It has to be able to penetrate your psyche. It's why every single module that I have created in erotic integration has binaural beats lined in the background of it. So that when you're listening, you actually are focusing on a subconscious level, so that you are tranced into hearing what I'm saying. And do you know what I've been hearing from people who are in it? Alyssa, just listening to these is rewiring how I perceive sex. Of course it is. Of course it is. And then you add the depth of the actual practice of self-pleasure practice, of choosing to work for it, choosing to set aside the time, space, having the audacity to take an hour of your day to prioritize your pleasure. That's how revolutions start. That's how you support your voice. That's how you support your power. Because suddenly your power isn't power over, it's power in. And that is the most powerful kind of power. When I can say, yeah, you know what? Yes, I choose to cease resistance to my experience. I choose to see exactly what I'm being told based on my own experience and open to it. And that's the same pathway that leads to the most mind-blowing kind of sex, the most obliterating kind of orgasm. So dive in with me. Dive in with me. Dive in with me into erotic integration. Let's go. Let's dance. Stop waiting. This work is fucking real. And it's real, and it's also personal. It's going to hit you different than it's going to hit the person next to you. And that's why you have 4 hours of one-on-one with me. That's a lot of time. Especially for the availability of the course as far as the cost. It's so good. It's so good. It's so good. I fucking love bringing people through it. Because we have been conditioned to think there's a right way when it comes to sex and sexiness and sensuality, and there isn't. There isn't. And the more you can orgasm yourself into obliteration, the more you feel that as the goddamn truth. And the more you feel that as the goddamn truth, the more you live that. And the more you live that, the more it ripples into every facet of your life. Okay, yeah, I'm projecting my experience, but guess what? Now it's not n equals 1. Now my population is 14. And I don't believe in coincidence. So, does anyone have questions? I know there's a handful of you who have been hanging in the whole time. And I thank you for that. It feels super good. Okay, no questions? In closing out here, I have one more May one-on-one space. I have 2 open June spaces. If you want to deep dive with me, yes, erotic integration is a deep dive, but if you want to move through a 6-month to a year container, sliding scale is absolutely always available. My prices are not cheap, and you can ask any client I've ever worked with. I am happy to negotiate. I'm happy to negotiate. You know, for better or worse, for my specific business model, I'd rather have clients that are paying less than have no clients that are not paying at all. Not because of the pay, but because I love my work. Yesterday, I got to do almost 7 hours of calls. It was one of the best fucking days I've had in a long time. It was such a full day. I got to dive in with unique beings and dance in their human design, in looking at different entry points and going, yeah, you know what? As a 4-1 profile, you're going to have a totally different experience and intimacy than someone with a 6-2 profile. As a 4th line personality, you're going to look for people who you feel a brotherly, sisterly connection with. Those are going to be the people you want to have sex with eventually. As a 6-line profile, you're going to look for people that are your fucking soulmates. And that's going to be your entry point. As a 1st-line personality, you're going to look for pursuit, or pursued. The preemptive strike, boom, let's go. Yeah, to dance again. As a 2nd line, you're going to be like, no to you, no to you, no to you. I'm trying to do my own dance. And then someone's going to do the same dance as you. And you're going to go, oh, my energy's open to you. But guess what? If you hold to those scripts that tell you there's a right way, you can't find your way. And your way is the only right way. And it's a way that's ever changing. If there is a God, she's got a sense of humor. He's got a sense of they have a sense of humor, for sure. And I think we're here to enjoy it. And that's what we'll do in the one-on-one containers. You know, that's what we do is we go, how can you enjoy your experience? How can you learn how to be more you? How can you allow yourself to be more you? That's why it's the most powerful thing a woman can do is to experience her orgasm, because she gets to experience the darkest, deepest, most internal parts of herself brought to the surface for a moment. And that burns some shit down. Mr. Fluff, oh, you're so handsome. Yes? So, Erotic Integration is open. Those sliding scale coupon codes are still up. I'm probably going to keep them open till May. I'm about to send out a newsletter that's going to give you a hefty discount code for Erotic Integration. So, if you are not already, go subscribe. That's going to probably go out by end of day today, early tomorrow. Upwards of $1,000 off the course. And that will be open until May. End of May, May 31st. I want people in this so I can become masterful at guiding people through it, because holy shit, that work is epic. And like I said, if you're like, Alyssa, I really want to work with you in a one-on-one, negotiate with me. Negotiate pricing with me. If you're like, hey, $4,500 for 6 months of work together and access to your curriculum feels a little bit too steep, tell me that. I'm not going to be offended. I get it. Actually, I had one of the coolest experiences with a client in January. She was like, Alyssa, I've followed you for a long time. I really like your work. I'm into it. And here's my budget. What can we do with this? And I was like, hell yeah. Your budget could have been $2 an hour. And the way that you showed up and presented this, you are exactly the kind of client I want to work with. Exactly the kind of human I want to dance with. Exactly the kind of hero I want to guide. And that was a really cool moment for me. And, you know, again, now I'm just riffing and I'm moving into real Transparency Tuesday on a wacky Wednesday to say, yeah, I need to get paid. Yeah, I do. Because I need what I'm doing to be sustainable. I want to be a old ass grandma lady doing this still. My intention is not to become famous. My intention is not to have bajillions of followers who pay me all this money. No, my desire is to actually use my experience and my study to guide the people who are like, yeah, this resonates. This lands with me. And I'm kind of terrified. And I don't even know what I'm getting into, but I can feel the pull. If you are someone who needs to, let's say you have touch cognition or smell and you need to be in human form, I'll hop on Zoom with you first. But even better than that, end of August 31st through September 5th, myself and Rivka will be hosting a retreat here in Colorado. We're going to keep it really intimate, probably like cap it at 9 to 11 women. There will be integration of human design, of yoga. How Rivka will be teaching yoga at this is she's actually going to teach you how to build your own practice off of the framework of course, her the classic yoga flow, but with her attunement to what you actually need. And then your attunement to what you actually need. And this is where, once again, we circle all the way back to the beginning of this conversation. to the point of this conversation, which is your way is the right way. And the only way to experience your way is to allow yourself to cease resistance, to give yourself permission to fully experience your orgasm, aka give yourself permission to fully experience your experience without the layers of conditioning that tell you it should be a certain way. And that's why if you are in a woman's body, if you are in a female body, you fully experiencing your orgasm is the most powerful thing you can do. Not just once, regularly. So yeah, August 31st through September 5th here in Colorado. It's up on my website. It's in the link in my bio. Go check it out. It's going to be a good time. We're going to do all kinds of fun stuff, transformative stuff, loving stuff, compassionate stuff, edgy stuff with a loving, compassionate heart and a real reverence for the truth of our own experiences. So, yeah, that feels complete. For the 8 of you who are hanging out, any questions? I know you were not here, or maybe some of you were here for the beginning, but any questions, anything that you feel like you missed, I'll give it a couple of moments, and then if not, I will depart until next week. So does anyone have questions on what we talked about why it's so important to experience the fullness of your orgasm, of how that helps you to come home to the truth of your experience, how that helps you to trust your experience, how that helps you to obliterate the feeling of being beholden to the shoulds. The shoulds? Oh, fuck. I could do a whole Transparency Tuesday just on that. You know, the shoulds that we perceive mentally, how they stop us from actually allowing ourselves to have our experiences. This is why I say over and over and over and over and over again that the theoretical thought form, while important and while imagination is important, it's nowhere near the actual embodied experience of the thing. Just because you can perceive a thing doesn't mean it's going to go that way. You know? Okay. Let's leave it there. Thank you all for joining. What's out there? Mama, what's out there? No questions? Zero questions. No one has questions. Okay. Out we go. Thank you. I will see you next week.